The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to our third webinar in the Invasive Species Center's Asian Carp Canada series. My name is Christine Pinckney and I'm the Asian Carp Project Coordinator here at the ISC. The Invasive Species Center has partnered with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada to develop this Asian Carp Canada project, and these webinars are part of that project. The Invasive Species Center of Canada is a national non-governmental organization that builds partnerships, identifies priorities, and supports projects to protect Canada from the damaging effects of invasive species. The Invasive Species Center also connects stakeholders, knowledge, and technology to prevent and reduce the spread of invasive species that can harm Canada. Today I'd like to introduce you to David Marson. David is an aquatic science biologist with Fisheries and Oceans Canada. He has worked with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans since 2002 and has been with the Asian Carp program since 2012 when it was first started. He holds a Master's of Marine Management from Dalhousie University, and he has extensive fisheries field sampling experience working at the Great Lakes Laboratory for Fisheries and Aquatic Science, and he has been researching fish species at risk with DFO's Biodiversity Unit. David, I'm going to give the presentation over to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, hello and welcome everyone, and thanks for taking the time to take part in my presentation. I want to start by highlighting that this presentation is actually a follow-up to the Asian Carp 101 presentation by Becky Cudmore. In Becky's presentation, the biology of each of the 4 species of Asian carps is discussed, along with the risks to the Great Lakes should they invade. Becky highlighted that the real key to minimizing their threat is preventing their establishment in the Great Lakes. So my goal today is to give you a better understanding of the work that is currently being undertaken to monitor for Asian carps in the Canadian waters of the Great Lakes. So in my presentation, I'll go through some of the decision-making, Okay. So in my presentation, I'll go through some of the decision-making processes with regards to where we are conducting our sampling in the Great Lakes Basin. I'll also give some information on the types of traditional gears we're using, as well as go through some of the techniques we use to increase the likelihood of capturing our target species. I have a brief summary of environmental DNA collection and analyses in the Great Lakes. And finally, I'll go through a summary of some of the 2013 sampling and 2014 field sampling, along with some details on our rapid response events. So the focus of this presentation is on the second and third pillars of the DFO Asian Carp program, the early warning and response. So the early warning, the monitoring component, and specifically the actions taken if Asian carps are detected in the response pillar. So the best way to protect the integrity of the Great Lakes Basin is by preventing the introduction, the arrival, establishment, and spread of Asian carps. So how do we do this? So the monitoring program focuses on the early detection and removal of Asian carps through traditional gear and eDNA sampling surveillance. We focus our efforts in areas that are suited to Asian carp reproduction and areas where Asian carps are likely to be attracted. We will also follow up on verified reports of Asian carp sightings. So the more active eyes we have out there, the more likely we are to be successful in early detection and removal of these species. So clearly we're dealing with a vast amount of space in the Great Lakes to monitor for relatively rare species. To help focus our sampling efforts, an analysis was done to identify those areas most suited to Asian carps. computer modeling helped to identify the suitability of Great Lakes tributaries for Asian carp spawning. Unimpounded tributary lengths from the mouth at a Great Lake to at least 100 kilometers upstream were identified using ArcMap software. Barrier data were collected from MNRF and Natural Resources Canada. Tributaries were also analyzed based on the reproductive requirements related to water temperature and water velocity, so the requirements of the Asian carp species. Water temperature was used to measure growing degree days and calculate hatching rate of eggs, and the velocity rate was used to identify rising hydrographs, which is a key signal or a trigger for Asian carp spawning. Now, for more details about this analysis, Dr. Nick Mandrak will be presenting in much more detail in his upcoming webinar on December 3rd, so the next one in this series. So high-ranking sites that were selected from the modeling were visited in 2013 to confirm the suitability of the sites and whether or not those meeting the criteria truly did. So we went and actually ground truthed the information we took from the computer modeling. So in 2013, 24 different areas were sampled in Lakes Erie, Huron, and the Huron-Erie corridor. 23 of the 24 sites were selected to remain in the 2014 monitoring early detection surveillance program. Now, there were many more tributaries that we went out and scouted, but they weren't all suitable for sampling, and many of them were found to have barriers lower down in the rivers that would have limited fish movement close to the mouth. So they weren't all actually sampled, but many more we went out and scouted them. And as you can see from the map, we also included sites in some highly productive wetland habitats, so down in Long Point Bay and Rondo Bay, for example. In 2014, additional sites were scouted and sampled in Lakes Erie, Huron, Ontario, and Superior. Not all of the sites sampled will be carried forward into the monitoring program, but we will also be including additional sites in Lake Ontario, and they'll be scouted in 2015. So you can see the eastern end of Lake Ontario. We will still be going out there scouting more sites and including them in our monitoring program. High priority sites in close proximity to known detections of grass carp in the southwestern basin of Lake Erie were also revisited in this past fall, as well as the Grand River, where a couple of grass carp have been detected. So the focus of our traditional sampling is to target habitats that are most suited or attractive to Asian carps. We want to get out and deploy gears that will capture them if they're there, and do so in a repeatable fashion. So develop protocols that can be repeated. So site selection, for example, we want to pick suitable locations and use GPS and narrative locality to ensure that the same spot is fished year after year. And we want to ensure that our deployment is standardized as well. So we want to make sure that the nets, when they are being set, they're being set in the same way by each crew, and that the effort going into sampling is consistent between our groups. So while we're out there, we want to confirm, what's there in those habitats now as well. So we're really doing a full fish community assessment while we're doing our sampling. So where do we begin? Well, it's best to learn from those who are dealing with the removal of these fishes right now. In the fall of 2012 and 2013, I was given the opportunity to get some experience sampling Asian carps in Illinois. Kevin mentioned that in his presentation about having people up and training, and I was one of those who was lucky enough to take part in that. So I was hosted by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, but had the chance to work with a number of agencies, including the Illinois Natural History Survey, Southern Illinois University, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, as well as contracted commercial fishermen. So based on the experiences that they have had in the U.S., the DFO Asian Carp program is able to include some gears not often used, if ever, in Canada. So we're also helping to do some research with regards to how well the gears and techniques being used in Illinois transfer to our program, which has more wetland and lake habitats. So while we have used the experiences from our partners in setting up our program, we are adapting our sampling to ensure that we're deploying gears that will work best in the habitats we're targeting for Asian carps. One other bit of very valuable information we've been provided with is the tendency for the Asian carp species to be more susceptible to certain gears and less susceptible to others, depending on the species. And the fact that you really need to deploy multiple gear types to be successful in detecting the 4 species. So in our program, we have a variety of active and passive gear types that we deploy. Passive gears, like the fyke net in this photo, are deployed in the water, and fishes become entangled or captured by swimming into the net during their natural activities. So they're not being herded or actively scooped up with these passive gears. The fyke nets are deployed by setting the lead, the long material off the front here of the net, directly to shore and pulling the box or the back end of the net out perpendicular to shore. So the lead directs fishes, if they're swimming along the shoreline, into the net, where they're funneled through subsequent funnels into the back of the net. So with these nets, we use a fine mesh, and it's really for targeting juvenile and small-bodied fishes, but we do catch large fishes and turtles as well. These nets are best in low flow areas and can be successfully deployed in heavy vegetation, which can limit the use of other styles of nets. And just as a little side note, this was the style of net that we used in 2013, and in 2014 we incorporated this netting on the frame at the front to try and exclude larger turtles from getting into our nets. So another much larger style of passive net is the 6-foot hoop net. So similar to the fyke net, it's deployed with the intention of capturing fishes that happen to swim into it. Unlike the fyke net, it doesn't have a lead to direct fishes into it. So the hoop net's designed to be deployed in deeper flowing water. The bag end of the net is anchored upstream, and the flow of the river helps to keep the net deployed. The net's set parallel to the flow on the river bottom, and fishes traveling upstream enter into this 6-foot opening and are funneled into the back of the net. So there's subsequent funnels in this net as well, so it's easier for them to get in than it is to find their way back out. These nets have a 2.5-inch bar mesh, so small fishes can pass through it, so we're really targeting larger bodied fishes. And these nets are helpful for our sampling program because they're able to get down into the deep flowing waters where fyke and trap nets can't be successfully deployed, and where fishes may be too deep to effectively electrofish, so it gives us access to those waters we weren't able to sample before. So trap nets are very similar in design to the fyke nets, but in this case they have a coarser mesh, and that's to help reduce the number of small fishes captured as well. So we're again targeting larger fishes with these nets. They also have a much longer lead than the fyke nets. In this case, the trap nets have a 27-meter long lead versus the 4.5-meter lead in the fyke nets. And they also have a couple of wings on the sides. So in this picture, the lead would run out the middle here, and these two are wings on the side of the net. Sorry, and they really help to funnel or direct fishes into the net as well. So like the fyke nets, we generally set the trap nets in shallow near-shore habitats, and the trap nets can be effectively set in heavy vegetation as well. But generally they need to be kept in low or no flow situations. And they are very good at capturing larger bodied fishes. One net in particular that we set last year in Cedar Creek, we had a total of actually it was this past summer, sorry, a total of 160 adult common carp, 11 bigmouth buffalo, 24 goldfish, 134 brown bullheads, 9 bowfin, 7 white perch, a couple of channel catfish, and a long-nosed gar. And again, this is coarser mesh, so these aren't juvenile fish. They were all adults, so that's not the norm, but you know, they are quite effective at capturing these large fishes. So another type of gear we use, which I don't believe is used elsewhere in Canada, is trammel nets. So trammel nets are a type of gill net. Generally, gill nets are deployed on the lake bottom or suspended at a particular height in the water column and left to fish for several hours or a full day, perhaps longer in certain situations. The gill net works by entangling fishes that swim into it. So the net size really affects the size of the fishes that can be captured. Now we use large-sized mesh to target large-bodied fishes again, such as adult common carp, buffalo species, and Asian carps. Smaller fishes can pass through the net, though, without becoming entangled, and that's quite helpful as well, because as you can see in the middle photo, the fish that do get caught get quite entangled, and it's time-consuming to get them out. So if you're catching a lot of small fishes as well, it's really going to limit the amount of time you have for sampling or how many sets you can get done in a day. So, and another additional benefit to trammel nets is the much coarser walling on both sides of the monofilament net. So if you look down on the bottom left corner, the photo shows a deployed trammel net in the water. Now, fishes of a certain size will become gilled in the monofilament mesh, so this lighter colored mesh on the inside. As they swim into the net, they become wedged into that monofilament, and they can't back themselves out, and they're unable to push themselves all the way through, so they're gilled in the gill net. The second larger white paneling on the outside here, again it's on both sides of that gill net, works to capture much larger fishes that would be too big to become gilled in the monofilament. So what happens is the larger fishes try to swim through the net, and the monofilament actually creates a bag around them. So they're not technically gilled in the net, but they're bagged in the net. And our largest fishes are captured in this way, in this style of net. So now, since we're targeting nearshore wetland habitats in search of Asian carps, we don't want to leave these nets deployed for a very long time, because entangled fishes will struggle and exhaust themselves. So when you combine that with the warm waters of those nearshore wetland habitats, especially in the summer, it's a real recipe for disaster. So we'd experience very high mortality if we set these nets overnight. So to overcome the tendency for our target fishes to sit idle while our nets soak, you know, and obviously they wouldn't become entangled in the nets if they're just sitting there. We set our nets and the fish don't move into them, we're not going to capture them. We actually use techniques that have been developed by a contract commercial fisherman in the United States in their Asian carp removal program. So using extended plungers to smack the water surface, or banging the hull of the boat and revving or rooster tailing the engine, as you can see in the bottom right, we actively push or scare the fish into moving around in that area. So we'll set our net, which are 200 to 300 yards, and you can see a net set up here, so that the majority of this net is running parallel to the shoreline, and then at the two ends they run in and block off this particular area of habitat. Then we'll take the boat into this enclosed area, and using the pounding technique, we'll get the fishes really moving in that area, and that'll increase the likelihood of them coming in contact with the net. So this allows us to set the net, get in there and spook fish, get them moving, and pull the net again much quicker, so we can capture a lot of the fishes in that area and not have deployed the net for a long time. So one of the active sampling methods we use is seining. We actively deploy the net and pull it in to capture fishes in nearshore shallow habitats. So seines can be deployed in a variety of habitats, from no to moderate flow, and seining generally captures smaller bodied fishes. So you can see an example here of us setting, waded out with the net, and I'm turning and coming back in towards shore. So the seine can be deployed by wading, such as that example, and pulling the seine in, or it can be deployed in deeper water by boat, and then pulling into shore from then. Large fishes, however, are generally fast enough to sense that we're there and just swim out of the area. So generally we're capturing much smaller bodied fishes. There are, however, large commercial seine nets deployed in the Great Lakes Basin that are capable of capturing large or adult Asian carps. So by using a much longer net with a coarser mesh, a large area can be blocked off with a seine and then pulled into shore. Now there's obviously many more logistics to deal with when you're considering such a large seine, namely that the larger area you're seining, you're going to have a lot more drag on the net, making it so it's going to be very heavy and difficult to pull in, as well as the increased likelihood of having the seine become entangled on debris. So if you're pulling it on a large area, you're more likely to get it caught up on logs or rocks or something like that. And it would also be very difficult, if not impossible, to try and seine in really heavily vegetated areas. So boat electrofishing is another active sampling technique we use. Boat electrofishing works by sending out a pulsed electrical field from the boat that attracts fishes towards the anodes. And the anodes are these kind of booms that hang out to the front of the boat up here, you can see. As the fishes approach the boat, the gradient in the electric field increases, and the result is that the fishes become stunned from the shock. The netters on the bow, and you can see netters on the bow of each of these boats, then use their dip nets to collect the stunned fishes and transfer them into a live well. The fishes can then be identified, measured, photographed, and released. Boat electrofishing is an effective gear for sampling a broad range of fish sizes, and it's also a very low impact style of sampling when you use it properly. So we have used the boat to do standardized sampling of transects, where we have a set amount of time that we shock in kind of a straight line, as well as targeted sampling where we're moving in and around complex structure, and you get a sense of that in this top photo as well, going into sample around down trees and stuff like that. Now we have had the opportunity in binational efforts to work with partners using multiple electrofishing boats simultaneously, and you see that down in the bottom left. During this effort in U.S. waters, the group was successful in capturing some grass carp, but it was also found that the grass carp were quite effective at sensing and avoiding the electric field. So the grass carp were either outrunning or jumping out of the electric field and weren't becoming or weren't captured. Now, obviously, no sampling method is going to capture 100% of the fishes in an area, but to try and help us out in this situation, we've begun to use trammel nets in combination with electrofishing to increase the likelihood of capturing these invasive fishes. So by blocking off an area with the trammel net and then shocking, we may increase the likelihood of capturing fishes that are fleeing the electric field. So another sampling tool that is quite new to fisheries sampling is environmental DNA, eDNA. How this tool works is that water samples are collected from water bodies, and the DNA shed from fishes via scale loss, feces, urine, or other body secretions can be filtered out, amplified, and analyzed based on species-specific DNA markers. Now, it's a very simple explanation, but essentially we're collecting DNA from the water. Currently, eDNA monitoring work for Asian carps in the Great Lakes Basin is conducted by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry in Canadian waters. eDNA sampling by Fisheries and Oceans Canada has been limited to instances where we have detected or captured a fish with traditional gear, and we've used that opportunity to test or research our eDNA sampling, so confirming that we're getting a positive eDNA in an area where a fish was captured at the time of capture. We'd expect it to be positive, and then follow up our sampling to confirm that no additional eDNA is in an area after traditional sampling fails to collect any additional fishes. So that negative would be an extra, negative eDNA would be an extra reassurance that no additional Asian carp are in that area. eDNA sampling is a very sensitive tool, but at this point we cannot confirm whether a positive eDNA result means there's actually a live fish in the area. So the eDNA could be from a boat hull, transferred from an area where there are Asian carps, could be a dead fish, could be through bird feces. We can't really determine how many fish, if there's a positive, if the age, the size of the fish, or how long the eDNA has been there. eDNA does hold a lot of potential, though, for monitoring and early detection, and a lot of research is going into it. And we'll hear a lot more about that in Dr. Chris Wilson's eDNA webinar, which is coming up in this series as well. So our program works out of two facilities. We have one crew working out of Sault Ste. Marie, and they sample our early detection sites in Lake Superior, Northern Lake Huron, and Georgian Bay. We have the remainder of the program based out of Burlington, Ontario. The data summary here is based on the collections made by the Burlington crew, which had 2 boats out sampling in 2013. So we sampled a total of 17 water bodies and 195 sites within those areas. So nearly 16,000 fishes were captured, representing a total of 73 species. And there's just a little idea of the effort of the 4 gear types used in 2013. So almost 150 hours of boat electrofishing, just over 1,700 set hours for fyke nets, 54 seine hauls, and just over 7 kilometers of trammel net sets. So a lot of sampling was conducted in 2013. While it was our first year out, and time was obviously needed to scout and assess areas, we did get a lot accomplished. We did, however, have some breakdowns with the gears, and we weren't able to cover all the water bodies with each gear type, although not all areas are amenable to being sampled by each gear type anyway, so we wouldn't expect all of these columns to be equal. And again, this doesn't actually include the sampling conducted by the Sault Ste. Marie group either. So in this slide, you can see the list of water bodies we sampled in 2013 out of Burlington. Please note that the sites with the asterisks only have the information from trammel netting, although they were boat electrofished and fyke netted by the Sault Ste. Marie group. So we would expect there to be more fishes and more sites in this when we incorporate their data. As you can see from this, the majority of the surrogate species, the common carp and buffalo, were captured in Lake Erie tributaries, so Cedar Creek, Grand River, Kettle Creek, and Anacoke. But there were quite a few in the Thames River and Canard River as well. And here's a list of the species captured by the Burlington sampling in 2013. As you can see, we did capture many species and feel that we were capturing a good representation of the fish community in the areas we were sampling. In this list of species, you'll see a few species at risk as well, including pug-nosed minnow, pug-nosed shiner, spotted sucker, spotted gar, and black red horse. So the distribution data for these fishes, as well as habitat data and genetic clips, are collected and forwarded to our other monitoring programs. So a lot of additional valuable data is collected while we're out conducting our monitoring work. So surrogate species are used to help us decide if we're sampling in the correct areas. Buffalo species, and more specifically bigmouth buffalo, have very similar habitat and feeding preferences to big-headed carps. And common carp provides us with confidence that our gears are working effectively to capture large, strong, mobile fish. Thankfully, big-headed carps aren't showing up in the Great Lakes. So for us to ensure we're sampling correctly, we have to rely upon these surrogate species as an indicator of our sampling success. And as you can see, trammel nets were our most effective gear for capturing surrogates. and we're actually the only gear that has captured Asian carp, and which was grass carp. So we had 4 crews sampling in 2014, 3 crews out of Burlington and 1 out of Sault Ste. Marie. We had 34 areas that were sampled, including new sites in Lake Superior, Lake Huron, and Lake Ontario. The following data is just from the DFO Burlington group again. So the 3 crews out of Burlington sampled 560 sites and captured just over 32,000 fishes, representing 84 species. And we did incorporate a few additional gear types sampled in 2014, and that included the 4-foot trap nets. So we decided after summer 2013 we really needed additional gears to target large body fishes in heavy vegetation in the wetland areas. So although we can set the trammel and gill nets in these vegetated areas, in the heavy vegetation they're actually really difficult to deploy properly, and they become a real nuisance when we're having to pick them clean when we're pulling them in. So the trap nets provided us with a great alternative to setting as many gill and trammel nets. We also introduced 6-foot hoop nets into our assortment of gear types, and these nets really helped us to be able to fish in those deeper flowing waters where we weren't able to previously deploy any gears. We also updated our boat electrofishing protocol in 2014 to match that of other monitoring groups. So shocking for 600 seconds a sight has proven to be a happy medium between catching too many fishes in a sight and getting too few. Now clearly the catch, it varies between water body and time of year, but that 600-second protocol has actually been a really good standard for us. And we have also installed some additional netting onto our Fike nets to reduce the number of turtles captured in our nets. I went through that on that slide. So, we do catch these turtles. We always set our nets in a way to provide breathing room if we do capture turtles so that they can access air. But by adding that netting and excluding large turtles, we're actually increasing the survival of the fishes in the net as well. So my apologies to the giant snapping turtles out there, but the DFO Asian Carp Program sampling buffet is now closed. So what happens when we catch an Asian carp? Well, that's what everybody's been waiting for. Well, we have caught a couple of grass carp, so it's not just a hypothetical situation. We do partner with the MNRF, so we encourage our we engage our partners quickly to let them know what's going on. When we catch an Asian carp, we move into a protocol called rapid response. We have several activities that are initiated immediately following a capture. So we take blood from grass carp to run through the flow cytometer, a piece of equipment that's in our lab that will help us to tell if the specimen is a triploid, a sterile fish, or diploid, a fertile fish. So this is very important information for us that helps to inform our response actions. So clearly a sterile fish is much less concerning than a fertile fish. If the fish is transported back to the lab then the fish is transported back to the lab along with blood samples for analysis. So while the fish is sent back to the lab for analysis, the field crews that are out continue to sample the area intensively with traditional gears to try and capture any additional Asian carps that may be in the area. And during this intensive sampling, the focus is solely on the capture of any additional Asian carp, and the fish community data isn't collected. Based on the information collected from the captured fish that went back to the lab, the response activities are either continued or the targeted sampling is ended. And then following our rapid response, additional biological samples are taken from the captured fish in the lab to get an idea of age and sex and what it's been eating and that kind of information. So here are the so-called mug shots of our first 3 unwelcome visitors. So they were all triploid fish, thankfully. So that means there wasn't a threat of them reproducing. The third capture on the bottom left here was a fish that was actually captured this fall. So we had our new Asian carp laboratory set up at the Canada Centre for Inland Waters. It was fully operational, and we were able to get the ploidy results, so whether the fish was fertile or sterile. Those results were collected within hours of capturing the fish. So we now have this ability to generate information much faster for managers than we were able to when we were relying upon services of other labs to run those tests. And just to give you an idea of the size of some of these fish, so this was the first fish that was captured on April 27th in 2013. So it was just over 43 inches in total length, so from the tip of the nose to the end of its tail, and just under 41 pounds in weight, so these are large fish. The second fish was captured by our early detection monitoring program in a trammel net in the Grand River again. And this fish was just under 31 pounds and 41 inches in total length. And the third fish captured again was in a trammel net. You can kind of see the edge of the trammel net here, and that was in the Grand River this past September on the 23rd. And it was just under 26 pounds and 39 inches in total length. So obviously, nobody wants these fish showing up in Canadian waters, any of the Asian carps, but it was reassuring to see that the gears that we're using, that we're deploying, are successfully detecting them, and that with the new lab up and running, we were able to provide valuable data regarding the fertility of these fish within hours of capture. So the focus of our program is to find Asian carps early and remove them from Canadian waters. We are proactively searching for them and targeting those areas we expect them to select. We are verifying our choices using surrogate species that have the most similar requirements. And we are continuing to adapt the program so that we're integrating the best gears and techniques for the detection and removal of Asian carps. So although it's our tendency as Canadians to be polite and well-mannered, this is one instance where we actually get, that full-on opportunity to slam the door shut, and that's what we're doing. So that wraps it up.
Okay, David, thank you very much for that great presentation. We do have some time for questions if anybody would like to ask some questions. Just please type them in the question box on your screen, and I can go through them and read them as we go through. So if anyone has a question. I actually have a question for you, David, to start out. If you just I'll just read it to you, and if you want to answer that, that would be great. How confident are you that you're finding and catching all the Asian carps that are out there in the Great Lakes, if they are there?
Well, we are doing a lot of work. We're out there intensively sampling areas that, we've used science to really generate the focus on areas where we would expect them to be showing up. So our program is really out there sampling intensively where we would expect these fish to show up. But we're not the only ones out there either. There's a lot of work going on in the Great Lakes. We have partner agencies sampling, both in Canada and the U.S., as well as other groups of commercial fishermen and recreational anglers. So we have a lot of eyes out there, and they're really not showing up. The nice thing is, we are specifically targeting the areas and using gears we would expect to catch them in, and we have caught a couple of grass carp, and again, thankfully they were sterile fish. But there's no numbers of these fish showing up, and they're not being caught by other groups either. So even with our intensive targeted sampling, there's just not fishes showing up, and I think we're doing a really good job to fix in on the areas where you'd expect them. And so I really don't, I'm confident we are out there sampling the right areas, and they're just not there.
Great. Somebody is asking a question about the monitoring program that you guys are doing there at DFO, and you did mention that you were coordinating with other agencies, so you are coordinated as well with the U.S.?
Yep, I mean, there's a lot of information sharing that goes between agencies, and especially with regards, I mean, our training right off the bat, it was, you know, super valuable to be able to get the experience actually sampling these fishes and seeing how they react to the different gear types. So that was a great head start for us. And then, you know, there's a lot of research going on in the U.S. as well, and, you know, that information is being shared with regards to either, you know, gear types that are more effective or exclusion devices or something like that.
Okay.
And then, you know, yeah, we do coordinate with conservation authorities as well in Ontario, because a lot of our sampling happens in CA properties, so we have them come out and see what we're doing and get information from them as well, especially with regards to accessing water bodies.
Great. Another question someone's asking is, where do you think that all the grass carp in the Grand River are coming from? I know that you said that you'd found one, and do you have any idea where they might be coming from?
Well, they have all been sterile fish, so there are certain states in the U.S. that do allow the stocking of sterile grass carp for the removal of aquatic nuisance vegetation. So we expect that it's you know, fishes that have escaped confinement in that respect and have kind of made their way into the Grand. So we don't know exactly where they're coming from, but you know, it seems to be that's the case. That was the most logical.
Okay. Also a question from someone asking, do you know, or is there any research on any product which will only kill invasive carp?
There is a lot of research going on with regards to that, like a species-specific poisons that would be activated by enzymes that are specific to the Asian carp species. So yeah, there is research going on, and you know, there's lots of information on the asiancarp.ca website as well as the asiancarps.us website. So yeah, definitely there is research going on with regards to that.
Excellent. And just remind anybody who still wants to ask a question, please type it into the question box and I'll read them as they come up. And I'd just like to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded, and so if you missed any parts of it, if you weren't able to see the whole thing and you want to go onto our Asian Carp Canada website at www.asiancarp.ca, you'll be able to see the webinar recorded version under the Resources tab, and that should be available sometime next week. We've also had 2 other webinars previous to this one, and they are both up on that website as well at this time. So if you've missed the first 2, feel free to come and have a look, and also see some more information about Asian carp on the website as well. And also we have another webinar coming up next week. Nicholas Mandrake from the University of Toronto is going to be giving us a webinar on December 3rd at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and he's going to be discussing Canadian research in support of Asian carp management, and that registration is now available and you can link to it from our website, and anyone who's registered on this website today will also have a link that will be sent to them so they can just register right from that. Okay, David, another couple questions for you if you want to answer. What are the plans for 2015 as far as going forward with what you're doing?
Yep, so we have a number of early detection sites set up throughout the Great Lakes, so we'll continue to monitor those sites, and we are expanding on the eastern end of Lake Ontario. We need to do some more scouting there and add a couple of sites into our early detection program there. So we will continue to go out with the gears you know, that were highlighted here, the tremel nets and the electrofishing nets, but you know, again, continue to try and adapt different gear types if we find something's working a little better. specifically using the trammel nets in combination with electrofishing. We'll be doing more of that next summer. But yeah, kind of maintaining the monitoring we did this year and adding a little bit more onto that as well.
Great to know. And do you know about anything that Canada is doing as far as discussing with the U.S. Regarding the Chicago area sanitary canal waterways? Do you know much about that? I know you're mostly involved with the boots on the ground sort of idea. Do you have any insight into what's going on with that?
I mean, that's more at a management level. I'm more focus on the actual monitoring and early detection component of the program. So I know they're very open to discussions in the U.S. and are adamantly trying to keep these fish out as well. But with regards to more of the management component, I guess that would be a question better directed to Becky Cudmore, and you can get her information from the first webinar in the series.
Okay. And I see that you have your email up on the screen, and so Becky would be the same ending, and you could just email her, I would imagine, using her becky.cudmore@dfo, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, great. So another question for you. Would it be feasible to set up a citizen sampling program where, and we've seen this done with other citizen sampling type groups or citizen watch groups, where local anglers might be encouraged to fish for Asian carps using various methods in say high-risk areas? Would that be a feasible type of thing that you think might happen?
I mean, we're really emphasizing for people to, report any Asian carps or any fishes that they feel are an Asian carp to the invasive species hotline. So we're really grateful for any information we can get with regards to setting up a targeted sampling. I'm not exactly sure how that would work, but yeah, I think the emphasis right now is just clearly we want as many eyes out there as possible looking for these fish, and getting a photo or some type of evidence to really positively identify what the species is, and again send that into the invasive species hotline, and then we can really follow up, and if these fish are detected, then we can go in with our gears and really target them with kind of tried and true techniques as well.
Mm-hmm. So if anyone thinks that they have spotted an Asian carp or they've caught one, they should call that invading species hotline that's on the screen right now, or go to their website, and you can actually fill out a form there and take pictures, save the fish. Is that the protocol that they're recommending?
Yeah, definitely. Photos are very helpful. It's tricky to tell some species apart. There's a lot more fishes out there than I think the average person is aware of, and certain ones definitely do look similar to Asian carps. But if you go online and really look at the characteristics, and Becky talked about that too in her webinar, there are certain characteristics to really to tell them apart. But if you're unsure, then definitely taking a photo and sending that